สภาวิชาชีพบัญชีขอเชิญชวนผู้ประกอบการและ SME ไทยยกระดับธุรกิจด้วยระบบดิจิทัลและทำบัญชีชุดเดียวโดยการใช้ซอฟต์แวร์และแอปพลิเคชันทางบัญชีที่ผ่านการประเมินรับรองเกณฑ์ขั้นต่ำ Cloud Accounting Software จากสภาวิชาชีพบัญชีเพื่อให้ได้ข้อมูลถูกต้องวิเคราะห์ได้อย่างครบถ้วนวางแผนธุรกิจได้อย่างมีประสิทธิภาพและสร้างกำไรให้เติบโตอันจะนำไปสู่ความมั่นใจในการทำบัญชีได้อย่างยั่งยืนเพื่อ SME ช่วยพัฒนาเศรษฐกิจไทยให้รุ่งเรืองสภาวิชาชีพบัญชีเชิญ SME สมัครใช้ Cloud Accounting Software ฟรี 1 ปีข้อมูลครบถูกต้องบัญชีเดียวธุรกิจยั่งยืนสนใจติดต่อสแกน QR Code หรือเว็บไซต์ www.tfac.or.th
สภาวิชาชีพบัญชีในพระบรมราชูปถัมภ์เป็นองค์กรตามพระราชบัญญัติวิชาชีพบัญชีพุทธศักราช 2547 มีบทบาทสำคัญในฐานะองค์กรวิชาชีพบัญชีของไทยที่ได้รับการยอมรับจากองค์กรที่เกี่ยวข้องทั้งในและต่างประเทศวิสัยทัศน์สภาวิชาชีพบัญชีเป็นองค์กรที่เสริมสร้างและพัฒนาผู้ประกอบวิชาชีพบัญชีให้เป็นมืออาชีพร่วมสมัยเป็นสากลและมีจรรยาบรรณปัจจุบันสภาวิชาชีพบัญชีมีนายกสภาวิชาชีพบัญชีร่วมด้วยคณะกรรมการสภาวิชาชีพบัญชีและกรรมการผู้ทรงคุณวุฒิด้านบัญชีอีก 16 ท่านเพื่อร่วมขับเคลื่อนวิชาชีพบัญชีไทยพันธกิจสภาวิชาชีพบัญชี 1. สร้างและพัฒนามาตรฐานทางวิชาชีพบัญชีเพื่อให้เป็นที่ยอมรับทั้งภายในประเทศและระดับสากล 2. พัฒนาและส่งเสริมความรู้ทางการบัญชีและศาสตร์ที่เกี่ยวข้องให้แก่ผู้ประกอบวิชาชีพบัญชีให้มีความก้าวหน้าในวิชาชีพเพื่อเป็นกลไกสำคัญในการสนับสนุนเศรษฐกิจของประเทศ 3. เป็นศูนย์รวมองค์ความรู้ด้านวิชาชีพบัญชีเพื่อให้คำปรึกษาแก่ผู้ประกอบวิชาชีพบัญชีและผู้ใช้งบการเงิน 4. เป็นตัวแทนของผู้ประกอบวิชาชีพบัญชีในการร่วมมือกับหน่วยงานต่างๆทั้งภายในประเทศและระดับสากล 5. ส่งเสริมและกำกับผู้ประกอบวิชาชีพบัญชีให้มีจรรยาบรรณวิชาชีพเป็นองค์กรวิชาชีพบัญชีที่มีระบบการจัดการที่ทันสมัยและให้บริการอย่างมืออาชีพการดำเนินงานของสภาวิชาชีพบัญชีมุ่งเน้นการให้บริการสมาชิกอย่างทั่วถึงและครอบคลุมพร้อมด้วยการรองรับการให้บริการสมาชิกในระดับภูมิภาคทั่วประเทศและมุ่งเน้นพัฒนาองค์ความรู้ในวิชาชีพบัญชีด้านใหม่ๆเพื่อเพิ่มศักยภาพให้ผู้ประกอบวิชาชีพบัญชีมีความรู้ความสามารถที่หลากหลายและตอบสนองต่อการเปลี่ยนแปลงในปัจจุบันและอนาคตควบคู่ไปกับการเป็นองค์กรวิชาชีพบัญชีที่มีการบริหารจัดการที่ดีภายใต้หลักธรรมาภิบาล
สภาวิชาชีพบัญชีขอเชิญชวนผู้ประกอบการและ SME ไทยยกระดับธุรกิจด้วยระบบดิจิทัลและทำบัญชีชุดเดียวโดยการใช้ซอฟต์แวร์และแอปพลิเคชันทางบัญชีที่ผ่านการประเมินรับรองเกณฑ์ขั้นต่ำ Cloud Accounting Software จากสภาวิชาชีพบัญชีเพื่อให้ได้ข้อมูลถูกต้องวิเคราะห์ได้อย่างครบถ้วนวางแผนธุรกิจได้อย่างมีประสิทธิภาพและสร้างกำไรให้เติบโตอันจะนำไปสู่ความมั่นใจในการทำบัญชีได้อย่างยั่งยืนเพื่อ SME ช่วยพัฒนาเศรษฐกิจไทยให้รุ่งเรืองสภาวิชาชีพบัญชีเชิญ SME สมัครใช้ Cloud Accounting Software ฟรี 1 ปีข้อมูลครบถูกต้องบัญชีเดียวธุรกิจยั่งยืนสนใจติดต่อสแกน QR Code หรือเว็บไซต์ www.tfac.or.th
สวัสดีค่ะเรามาพบกันอีกครั้งนะคะในซีรีส์ของ Forensic Accounting Facebook Live ของคณะทำงานด้านบัญชีนิติวิทยาขับเคลื่อนนะคะวันนี้เราก็ได้รับเกียรติผู้ทรงจาก สภาวิชาชีพบัญชีเหมือนกันแต่อยู่ที่อเมริกา AICPA นะคะเซสชันก็จะประมาณ2 ชั่วโมงแล้วเราก็เดี๋ยวถ้ามีคำถามอะไรก็ส่งเข้ามาได้เลยนะคะแล้วเดี๋ยวเราจะได้พูดคุยวันนี้ agenda นะคะก็จะขออนุญาตพูดภาษาอังกฤษนะคะ I would like to introduce our guests. The agendas today we will talking about the forensic accounting and make everybody want to be an forensic accountant. The first agenda I will introduce our guest speakers from AICPA. We really have an honors for them to participate with us and as you know, they are in US, so basically they are nighttime and we are in the morning. So I'm really appreciate our guest speakers to participate with us and explain to us about their, their field in US and around the world global initiative on forensic accounting, both academic and practice. And we will discuss on the second half of the seminar today. We will talking about how the accounting fields, the challenge and in the practice and educations. So further ado on, we talk about the we invite Jeff, our forensic accounting certified financial fraud. And Kari, she's managers on the associate. She used to be an associate accounting professor in Oregon. She's a tenure track, and then she moved to AICPA as a manager. And we got an honor for her to come and talk about extensive her field on accounting experience and AICPA, how they involved in global initiative on forensic accounting. The second guest speaker is Mr. Jeff. He's a CPA and CFF in practice, and he have extensive experience on forensic accounding field, as you see here. He is managing director at Stout Groups and the chair of AICPA certified fraud, financial fraud, Credential committees in US. Okay, so you have anything to say hi to our audience in Thailand?
Yes.
Kari first.
Yes. Thank you so much, Payear. It is a great pleasure for us to be able to join you here this evening. When we learned about this opportunity, we wondered what we could share that might help the audience to understand what forensic accounting really is, and also to give the audience an idea of how studying forensic accounting and perhaps even earning credentials in forensic accounting with the AICPA might enhance their career path. And so this topic will be open to students, to practitioners, anyone who has a reason or background to learn more about forensic accounting. So we're very excited to be here. As you indicated, I'm the senior manager of the CFF Credential. The CFF Credential is an exclusive and prestigious credential offered only by the AICPA. It stands for Certified in Financial Forensics, and it really is a focus on how to maintain the integrity of the accounting profession worldwide.
Let's Jeff introduce himself, and then next will be Kari go through the CFF. Are you mute, Jeff?
I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Pierre and Kari, and everyone for joining today. I guess this morning for you, this evening for us. We always are excited at the opportunity to talk about forensic accounting as a profession. We'll get into this a little bit more throughout the presentation, but I have a background in forensic accounting and spent majority of my career in the dispute consulting, expert witness, and fraud and forensics space. And I also volunteer with the AICPA, and as part of my volunteering, I have chaired for several years the credential committee for the CFF credential that we'll talk about. And we're especially excited for a few reasons that we'll get into a little bit more later, but one, that we spent a lot of time talking about how to make the credential and more of a global credential. So we're very excited to talk about this with you all. And we're also always excited to talk about people that are interested in getting into the profession of forensic accounting. As someone that's done it for his entire career, I'm always looking for opportunities to say how much I love it, because I do think it's a profession that doesn't get as much exposure in the world of accounting. And we're very excited to talk about all of the interesting opportunities that you all could have in the field of forensic accounting. So thank you all.
Thank you, Jeff. And second half, we will talk extensive and make everybody excited about this career. And same thing here. I kind of like love accounting, and actually I want to promote, make everybody aware that how important the field is, and we have to step up to the next chapter of accountant's career. So let's go ahead and let Kari tell us about the credentials. Thank you, Kari.
Certainly. So we have just kind of combined some of the talking points, and so since we've introduced the CFF credential and what it is, we thought we'd just do an overview of the agenda. So Jeff, if you want to do the agenda.
Yes, no, thank you. So we've already introduced ourselves, so we've accomplished that, and so for the rest of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the AICPA as an organization and who we are. I as a volunteer, and Kari as a manager that works full time for the AICPA. We're going to talk also a little bit about some of the specialty credentials that the AICPA offers, including the CFF credential, and we're going to talk about the CFF credential pathway. We're also very excited to share with you all some student resources associated with this credential and with the profession of forensic accounting. And then our favorite part will come at the end, when we get to answer whatever questions you have about what we do and the future of forensic accounting and all the fun stuff that we think the profession can offer to young professionals. So looking forward to it.
Definitely. And who we are is a very large global organization. And one of the things that we find valuable is to build our network and our alliance and our relationships around the world. As Jeff said, we are interested in building our global presence and reaching out more in the area of forensic accounting and financial forensics in our profession. And we happen to have several specialty credentials, and Jeff, I'll let you speak a moment to those.
Yeah, so if we look at this slide, which it's as Kari mentioned, we are a very large organization, and as part of the AICPA, there can be specialty credentials that one can obtain based on various criteria. Some have examinations and that sort of thing, and real life experience. So we're going to be talking mostly about the CFF credential, which you see on the left-hand part of the screen here, but we also have very exciting credentials in other specialty areas. For example,
yes.
Sorry, we just went.
Sorry.
If we could just go back. Yep.
Okay. This one?
There we go.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you. No problem. Thank you. So just wanted to highlight real quickly that in addition to the CFF credential, We have credentials in Certified Information Technology, or the CITP. We have a specialty business valuation credential called Accredited in Business Valuation, or the ABV. We have a personal financial specialist credential for our financial planners, a certified in entity and intangible valuations, which is a specialty credential, and another specialty credential of certified in valuation of financial instruments. So all finance and accounting related, forensics, financial planning, business valuation, and specialty valuation. The AICPA really has a number of specialty credentials to differentiate yourself beyond just having an accounting degree or accounting license, in our case in the States, a certified public accountant.
Yes,
and
if
can
I can
move on to the next slide.
Yeah,
Right,
I just wanted to add quickly that one of the reasons we wanted to show some of the other specialty credentials that Jeff just explained is because the financial forensics area is a specialty. It's an area that one would look into after getting a background, a foundation in accounting. And after some level of mastery, then that person can look into the forensics field. And so we wanted to just give a context of some of the other specialty credentials offered and point out that tonight we will highlight the forensic credential because we happen to think it's one of the best ones. And also because that's what Jeff's expertise and my expertise is also in.
On the next slide on pathway.
So there are 4 steps to obtaining the CFF credential. And we will be pointing out, we will be talking on many different points throughout tonight, and we may circle around and pick up the same point a few times from different perspectives. We want to point out that the education that leads people into the forensic area can be accomplished in a couple of different ways. We can earn credentials and we can earn certificates. So on this particular slide, we're showing the CFF credential pathway. Now, this is the gold medal of the forensic world. And so all of the other credentials, or all of the other certificates rather, and all of the other courses would build into step 1 in the orange where it says learn. Education for forensic accounting is a critical key component. And then once that level of education is accomplished, then candidates would apply to pass the exam. They would simultaneously or shortly thereafter gain the required experience to apply for the credential. And once those items are complete, that candidate would be able to formally apply with the AICPA to get the credential. So we'll be breaking this down in different areas and different perspectives as we progress tonight, but wanted to give you the basic 4-step process for anyone who might ultimately be interested in obtaining the CFF credential with the AICPA.
Thank you, Kari. And
if we could, Payear, just go back 1 slide before that.
This one?
I just want to touch on this real quick too. Yeah, it's just to give a little bit more explanation of the credential itself. So currently, the CFF credential is granted exclusively to CPAs and what we refer to as other recognized equivalents who demonstrate experience in forensic accounting. And by that, we mean through the knowledge, skills, experience, and adherence to our professional standards. And that's what we mean by experience. So we believe this is a specialty credential and it does add credibility and indicates expertise in the area of forensic accounting, which can mean a lot of different things. And we're going to talk about that as well. But we have listed some examples here related to fraud detection, financial statement misrepresentation, and you can read the list here. These are just some examples, certainly not a comprehensive list of forensic accounting type services and engagements, but certainly a good representative list of different types of services. So we just wanted to walk through that as well, and then we can move on 2 slides to the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, and that's one of the good things about forensic accounting is it can be accomplished in pieces. It comes in a variety of different ways to get into this particular specialty niche. And this particular slide is giving us some data that goes back to what I was saying about the certificates and the credential. Essentially, there are three big blocks that are available for people to learn more about forensic accounting. In the current table, then you will see that there is a fundamentals of forensic accounting education block, and that's the FFA. There is a core block, which is the Certified in Financial Forensics Part 1. And there is a specialized block, which is the Certified in Financial Forensics Part 2. Now, the reason we're giving this detail is because it's really impossible to get into forensic accounting without some level of this background and training. Moreover, as we pointed out in the prior slide, these three credential blocks will build into the education, which is one of the 3 E's required to obtain the CFF credential for those who want to go that far. The thing I like and apply to get the CFF credential, then all 3 of these blocks will build into that knowledge base that a candidate would need in order to take and pass the CFF exam and then formally apply for the CFF credential itself. So it's a very involved process, but it is designed to step-by-step lead candidates through to success. Very similar to the United States CPA exam, so that once that person has completed all of this, they really are very well trained, very well educated, and very well experienced in the field of forensic accounting. For anyone who does want to go all the way to the CFF credential, the last bullet point addresses that is a separate exam. The credential exam is separate from each of the 3 certificate exams, and the credential exam is 2 parts. Each part is 2 hours. There are 160 multiple choice questions. It is offered year-round, and candidates may take this CFF credential exam either live or online. And if they want to take it live, they can do so at a Criterion Test Center. And we do have test centers that are located all around the world. The CFF exam does every day. ties into what we are tested on for the CFF exam. And you may find some of these line items very interesting or very appealing. We hope you do. And this is how our education is built. And this is the experience, the examples of experience that would be required in order to qualify for the CFF credential as well.
And if I could just add to that too, if you see the third section here, as specialized, that's an acknowledgement that even within the field of forensic accounting, there is further specialized knowledge. Engagements within forensic accounting. So even within forensic accounting, there's further specialization, and the exam is set up to account for that and to make sure that people understand and learn about these specialized forensic areas. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the exam and how to progress into CFF, which is again a specialty credential for forensic accounting. So we wanted to take some time to answer that we get and that the AICPA gets with respect to the CFF credentials. So to qualify for a CFF, a candidate must maintain his or her membership with the AICPA, so you must be in good standing, and currently hold a valid and unrevoked CPA certificate or license that has been issued by a state or international equivalent. We recognize that there are international equivalents to the U.S. CPA license, and those also would qualify. To pass the CFF exam, to actually sit for the CFF exam, a CPA is not required. So we do have candidates, and I can't recall if I was one of them. I don't think I was, but we do have folks sit for the exam and pass the exam before they obtain the CPA license, understanding that the CPA or the CPA equivalent is necessary to actually obtain the credential. So if you're working for your CPA or you're waiting for some other requirement in order to obtain your license as an accountant, you can still sit for the exam, and then after you've obtained that license or certificate, then obtain your CFF credential. In addition to the examination requirements and the CPA or CPA equivalent requirements, there's also an experience requirement. This is an acknowledgement that forensic accounting is a specialized field, and in order to obtain this credential, we want, the AICPA rather, wants some minimum experience, because this is not a beginner's credential. It's not, you don't need to have experience for 20 years, but we want to have some understanding and exposure to forensic accounting before you obtain that credential. And that's why we have a minimum requirement of 1,000 hours of experience related to the CFF body of knowledge, which, to the benefit of everybody, continues to expand, which makes it much easier to actually obtain those 1,000 hours of experience. We also have a continuing education requirement of a minimum of 75 hours of forensic accounting related continuing professional development, and there's a lot of education, continuing education that would qualify for that. So that's also something that's typically pretty broad and available. So In terms of just eligibility, those are some common questions in terms of what credential and experience and education you need to have in order to ultimately obtain the credential, recognizing that you can sit for the exam before you have finished these things.
There is a questions on eligibility on the testing. There is a license issue legally, international equivalence. There is an audience asking question about if there are CPA in Thailand, will it equivalent to apply for take CFF?
Yes, so it does depend on a case-by-case basis globally. We would take questions like that through our department, and we would verify with our governing body grants that license. If we do, then the answer is yes. And if we don't yet have an agreement, we may be able to establish one. So I would encourage anyone interested to reach out to me. My contact information will be provided at the end of the show. And with any questions at all, because quite often we have opportunities for making something like that happen, even if there isn't already an agreement in place.
Thank you very much. And that is, can you explain the process of the testing will be online format, right? E-learning, or how it does on the examinations format?
Yes, thank you for opening that question, because one of the things that Jeff was explaining is obtaining the CFF credential. And often a candidate may have experience and then take the exam, or the candidate may take the exam and then afterward go and get the experience. Mm-hmm. International candidates, of course, is a little more complicated, but it is flexible enough that candidates can work with an AICPA representative to establish a strategic plan to accomplish the CFF credential in the smartest way possible, in the most effective way possible. So it really is a case-by-case basis, especially internationally. However, there are a variety of ways that a candidate can go about obtaining that goal. And remember also that the CFF credential isn't the only way to get involved in forensic accounting. Those 3 certificates that we mentioned earlier are also excellent ways for candidates to learn more about the field and also to build into the CFF credential at the end. So I think one of my favorite things about this field is people who get into forensic accounting have a passion, and they're willing to put in the work and the creativity and build a strategy, as most accountants are aware. And so I would encourage them to reach out and be creative with how they would apply for that. Did you want to add any?
Yeah, I would like to. Oh, Jeff, would you like to add?
Please, you first, Pierre.
No, I just here I want to. I saw the comments and I want to may I speak in Thai to our audience a little bit.
Sure.
สรุปคือ CPA เมืองไทย case by case สอบได้แต่ว่าก็คือจะต้องอาจจะมีการเขียนคำร้องไปแต่ว่าถ้าเกิดว่าคือสภาวิชาชีพบัญชีถ้าเกิดท่านใดมีคำถามเรื่องนี้สามารถติดต่ออาจารย์ได้นะคะอาจารย์พเยียแล้วทางสภาทางคณะทำงานของสภาก็สามารถที่จะ accommodate ตรงนี้ได้เพราะว่าจริงๆแล้วเราก็มี MOU กับ AICPA ไปแล้วซึ่งตรงนี้มันก็จะเป็นตัว add on process ที่จะช่วยให้ยกระดับนักบัญชีไทยอะค่ะถ้ามีอะไรก็ถามมาได้แล้วเดี๋ยวจะตอบนะคะขอบคุณค่ะ Yes, Jeff. I just try to explain to them about we already have MOU with AICPA, and actually it's case by case, and I can be another the
Great.
first line of defense on the how to help them get along and process on CFF certified. And I understand the concept on the how the case by case, and then you have to verify all the documentations. And the test itself, my understanding is online and learning interactions. Like when you sign up for to take a test on CFF, then there is a process that you have to have a login process and then go in and learning material, and then how the test will be online test, right? It will can they take the test at home, or they have to go to center to take the test?
But if I may just answer this one, Jeff, both are available to candidates. If a candidate is close enough to one of our testing centers, which we do have worldwide, then they can go and test live. If they are not, they are allowed to test online. As you say, we have some security measures in place for online testing, but we do offer both formats for the exam.
Mm-hmm. There is a question on ASEAN CPA. The ASEAN CPA, the same thing apply with CPA, because there are, like Jeff explained, that there is a two track. The track that you are not required CPA license to take the CFF exam, then you still can take the CFF exam. However, you have to go through the process of verifications on the qualifications on whether or not you can take the CFF exam.
So yes, so you can take the exam, but to actually and pass the exam, but to actually obtain the credential, you would need to meet that requirement. And some people ask, well, if I don't have the experience, why would I take the exam? And what we say to that is, if you're looking to gain that experience, and one way to show potential employers that you are invested in the profession is to either sit for the exam or to go through one of the certificate processes that Kari mentioned to demonstrate. And we found that that's been a successful approach to obtaining that experience, because you've differentiated yourself now from other potential employees by showing that you're invested in the learning and education and certifications associated with forensic accounting.
Yeah, what I like to say is you upskill and actually make your life better when you know the information about forensic accounting. Then you will know that it's really related to your accounting professions in terms of day-to-day activity in a way. Like, for example, you closing the entry, or you have question on certain information on, like, for example, when you're doing trial balance, just the one line items you want to trade back and to investigate how it go along. That's only if you have forensic accounting educations, you will know where to how you can, almost like you have a tools to you have a tools to go in and investigate whatever that outcome will be. But
Right.
Next slide. The memberships. Kari, want to talk about the membership? Yeah.
I think that's me too. I'm gonna do this one. So the AICPA does offer free student membership, and we have provided a link. One control for that is to make sure to use your university email address when you register, and then we ask that you sign up for the section for our forensic evaluation section, or FVS, for news. That's also free with your membership. And you can then use your account to select what types of communication and other sort of emails that you'd want to receive as part of that. But when you do that, please take note of your membership number, because that will be your number going forward. But that is a great way for students, across the entire accounting profession, globally, to get access to information.
So the recommendation is use the college email, right? Not Gmail.
Correct.
That's
correct. Use
that's
your
my-
university email address.
That's my mistake. I applied for CPA, AICPA membership, and I use my Gmail account. I'm like, when I see this line, I'm like, oh, I forgot to use my college email, but I'm not the student, so I'm probably not gonna get a free student membership. So, yes, yeah, I went on a AICPA website often because I have to do CPE continuing education, like here CPA, here they have to do it as well in my part on that and keep the hours up. So we go into the next sessions on discussion on forensic accounting and dive into the experience and extensive on the I remember you guys went to global initiative on the the other day you're talking about what country that you went to have the curriculum in forensic accounting promotions and
Yes, so the association is eager to build and share our curriculum worldwide for forensic accounting. And Jeff has participated with me and other volunteers to present this information to countries such as Saudi Arabia. We just did a session with Bosnia-Herzegovina. We have a agreement with Canada, and we have several MOU agreements, as you mentioned, Payear, with a variety of universities and organizations around the world. So our goal is to take our current United States-centric content in our continuing education, in our certificate programs, and reorient it to a global perspective, which is part of why we're very happy to be here today talking about it. And that we have a model curriculum that is set up like a library. It is not prescriptive, rather it is more like an archive of artifacts that educators can use to enhance their classrooms so that we can build our future of forensic accountants while at the same time continuing the profession of forensic accounting as well.
So do you have you found any challenge, like for example, the reason why I want to brought up this issue, this part is like Thailand have our own language, Thai. Like you went to Bosnia and Saudi Arabia, and they have their own language too. So, do you have any challenge, or you want to share any experience that you have been facing?
Sure. Yeah, I can touch on that. As we've gone through this journey of globalization, probably the two biggest challenges we have are just cultural things like dialect, and the fact that those things can result in differences in terms of terminology or accounting.
Yes.
Rules and standards, one, and then the second one, which is probably more specific to forensic accounting, is the recognition that by definition, forensic accounting lives in a world of of law and regulation. And those things obviously vary across continents and countries. So what we've come to also appreciate, though, as out of that, is that there are core concepts and underlying competencies associated with forensic accounting that transcend those challenges. Those challenges will always be there, but to truly globalize this credential, we are focused on what is universal within forensic accounting, and also where a professional needs to understand that things are not universal. We are not asking our credential holders to be experts in various languages to qualify, or various laws by country to qualify. But we do want everyone to understand that those rules do differ. And when you are practicing in different countries, that you need to have at a minimum an understanding that things might be different, and then rely on local resources, in our case, typically lawyers, to guide us on how the laws are different. So one of the biggest challenges, beyond just the obvious, Pierre, in terms of dialect and language and terminology, is how do we take a credential that is in large part dictated by a law and make it universal when the laws are not always the same. And that is something we've really worked hard at to make sure that we're not missing that point. But that, I would say, to answer your question, was probably the biggest challenge that we had to overcome as part of this transition. And I'll just say one more thing, that in order for us to do that, we had to bring on volunteers from all over the country, the world rather, that have, or at least people that have experience working in most countries, to help us sort of understand where the similarities are and where the differences are. So that was definitely our biggest challenge.
Yes, I would say 4 years ago, we evaluate CFF curriculums, and then we try to find, what is forensic accounting in other part of the countries does, and then try to evaluate ourselves in Thailand, how we going to step on the forensic accounting curriculum, or how we going to do it. That's what we start with CFF Credential. And then we come to realize, like Jeff said, about the laws part, because the forensic accounting pretty much tie into legal arenas like fraud and anti-money laundering. And people start thinking of just that. But we try to advocate that that is just probably 1/5 of the practice. There is another chunk of it, of the service practice in accounting, that people did not realize that this is actually the more fun part. You can have the forensic accounting, if we try to advocate that, I would say it's like business language. If we're thinking of accounting language, business language, then pretty much everybody say the same language. Even though you say different, dialects or talking different language itself, but business language itself, and the core value of the curriculums, like accounting is accounting, the principal accounting still does and still do, but the business part maybe change on the platform at the surface, like transform from paper environment to digitalized environments. However, the principal core basic still there. The challenge is how we can make the curriculum and make the people aware that forensic accounting is interesting field and is appealing on the surface, that it's not like day-to-day activity like you debit and credit and sit here and business language always you buy things, you sell things, you pay for things, that's it, you know. But forensic accounting is more appealing than that. Now, come to your practice, Jeff. What is you make you feel like you still stay with this career?
Yes. Well, I think, you know, what you just said about, you know, it being interesting is definitely part of it. So I've been doing this my whole career. I was one of, it's become more common now, but it was more rare when I started to be, to go right into forensic accounting and not start in a traditional field. And we do hire folks, you know, right out of school now for forensic accounting, but we also hire a lot of people that have done audit or tax or some other finance related work and then have become interested in forensic accounting. So I start there because I've always said that, you know, I could always convince an auditor or a tax person that what we do is more fun. And I've been pretty successful from a recruiting perspective in being able to do that. But I think for me, having that finance and accounting background, there are a few things that really resonate or stick out for why I enjoy doing this work. The first one being that it's problem solving. There are tools and best practices, but in most cases that I work on, there is no instructions, there's no checklist, there is no sometimes clear answer or goal. It is truly a living thing that we have to figure out the best solution for, and over time you use your experiences on different similar cases with similar fact patterns to inform you, but every case is still different. We use the term or phrase facts and circumstances a lot, like, you know, similar facts and circumstances, or everything, you know, different facts and circumstances. And what I like about what we do is that while I've worked on very similar cases, like Ponzi schemes or theft or financial statement fraud, those are things you can do many of those, but every one of those is also unique in terms of what industry the company is in and how the alleged bad person or bad actor committed this crime, how it was uncovered. Did we uncover it? Was it already uncovered? And we're trying to figure out how this happened and what the exposure is, and then also making sure it doesn't happen again. So I think for me, the reason I've stayed in this, the primary reason, is that every case is different, and there's no set way to do it. There's case law, there's best practice. Trust me, there are things that we teach these and we test them in our exam. But every case is different and requires its own sort of thought. That's probably the biggest reason. The other one I'll say is a little bit more personal and selfish, not selfish, but personal, in the sense that I really enjoy talking about what I do. And in a lot of cases, part of the reason we're being hired is not to necessarily figure out something, but to explain it to someone who may not understand accounting or a complicated aspect of accounting. So I could get hired or a competitor of mine could get hired to figure out how much money was stolen and write a report about it. Okay. And we would both get hired. We could both do this job of finding out where the money went and write a report that explains it. But then when you have to get up in front of a judge or a jury and explain it to them, that's a different skill set in and of itself. And what I really like is that the skill of explaining is part of the profession. And I really like that aspect of it as well.
Thank you, Jeff. And actually, the being part of the forensic accounting, the appealing is is not mundane job, and you always, you have to observe, and then you have to have experience and soft skill. And I noticed that Kari have extensive experience on human research on. I saw here is CPA, human skill competency. I would like for you to talk after Jeff talking about experience on his field, and then I would like you to talk about why you interested in this type of topics.
Yes, so Jeff gets the exciting part of going to court and being an expert witness, and I don't know how many of your audience would be familiar with the term poker face, but it's somebody who can remain very calm and very professional under pressure. And I think Jeff is pretty good at that. I, on the other hand, am not very good under pressure. So I found other ways to be involved in forensic accounting. And I started out just doing investigative work in a supportive capacity, and have noticed that the soft skills you referred to were very, they're part of our profession that goes unnoticed. So we have the hard science, the applied science of the accounting, the debits and the credits and the things that you were talking about earlier. And then we have the human element. And the AICPA actually coined the term human skills. And when they joined with CIMA, the CIMA has people and leadership skills. And those items were what I ended up researching in academia in order to find my personal way to get involved with forensic accounting and to have something to talk about. And so I find that what seems to work best is to have a balance of what Jeff has expertise in, and also have a balance of the human element, because without the communication and without the empathy and without the social psychology components, it's very difficult to gain mastery in the area of forensic accounting.
So yes,
I'm sorry. I just want to say I've known Kari now for a little bit of time, and I didn't know that that you had experience in that, and it's I've never heard it put that way before. It's something I'm very excited when I hear that, because obviously there's science behind it, and but what we try to teach our analysts that are just starting out, the importance of the hard and soft skill. And what we try to do is promote people to do things like this and get up and speak about a subject in forensic accounting, but to get comfortable, being in an environment where you have to explain something to someone and then answer questions. So I'm excited, Kari, to talk to you about that later, because maybe you can come and talk to our firm about that stuff too.
Wow, I found you a new topic, huh? You know what, I'm during Jeff talking, and I'm thinking of, I want to tell accountant in Thailand, say, you used to work in accounting job. Accounting job, not talk to anybody. You always sit in the small cubicle and just do it, and without talking. Now it's time for you to get out of your desk. Get out of your cubicle and talk. My old day, when I doing report and they find discrepancy, my job is to find out what's going on, investigate it. And if each discrepancy is mean, each one line item is mean one department. Say, but sometimes I'm talking like more than 5 departments. If the discrepancy differences is like 4 or 5 object code, I have to go like to 5 people to talk to. The article is on that is how you can get your soft skill to get the information that you want. At the same time, you are not their boss and you are not mandated to do, there is no legal requirement for them to give out the information. So the soft skill, the human skill, and sometimes you have to start, observe. And that's when forensic accounting skill and soft skill, it come to pay. Even though you are not going to practice in forensic investigations. But in terms of accountings, when you try to closing entry or, try to find the error, you still have to do some investigation on the term of understanding data collections method. This is I'm trying to get the audience understand both of you guys before we dive into the serious information about data collection and investigations. Now, from now on, we're going to talk about the understanding of how you work technique that you are apply at your work, what type of scenario that you need to do on the surface. Since forensic accounting, you go to 10 investigation, 10 method can be applied, So here, data collections method that we have, what you guys have things to share to us about your experience, Jeff? First on your
yeah,
work.
sure. Yes, and actually to kind of tie it back to the credential, there's part of the content that is taught related to information gathering, because it is such an important aspect of what we do. And I think it's actually in the definition, the AICPA's definition of forensic accounting, that you're supposed to do. The first, I think it's one of the first aspects of it, is to gather and analyze, interpret, and explain information. So the gathering part is the first part. So for me, when I think about collection, I think about it in 2 different venues. In a legal or we use the term litigation context, the data collection can be controlled by the court. So how information is exchanged between parties, even if the government is one side of that, right? And the government sometimes has special collection powers that we could talk about too. But how information is collected in a litigation scenario is somewhat dictated by the court. And what we as forensic accountants will do is assist the attorneys in making sure that they're requesting the right information that we need for that case. Or if they are interviewing or taking depositions, we are assisting in what types of questions should be asked in order for us to have the information that we need for our analysis. So in a litigation setting, the data collection can be somewhat controlled. We're still thinking about all of these things, but it's the court is through what's called discovery, is going through that process. Now, on the investigation side, that's where all of these methods really come into play, because we're now going into a situation where we have the ability to gather the information on our own, and then we will, through any number of these methods, sort of systematically get the information that we need. Interviews is always a big one for us. And the other one that I think, just because of the world we live in, when I see data collection, just because everything is so digital now, and accounting systems are quite sophisticated. We are, a lot of what we do now is electronic data, digital data extraction, large data sets, where we then will input into our systems, and we use various, software depending on the case to analyze and interpret that data depending on what the case is. The forms part and questionnaires and checklists, we do some of that. I mean, there isn't, I know I said we don't have checklists, so I don't want to go too far into that, because a lot of times you're choosing different things, but we have sort of standard information we're always asking for, especially if it's a financial dispute or investigation where we need to understand the underlying financial situation of the company. But all of these are useful tools, not always all necessary,
Right.
but it's again kind of goes back to that you have to know what's important for a specific case, and how are you going to get the information that you need. And just one other thing I'll say, and I think this really hits to the credibility and objectivity of what we do. We are not we do not want to be steered to a specific set of information and away from other information that someone may not want us to find. We do not only want to look for the information that we think might be helpful and ignore information that might be to the detriment of some situation. We as CPAs have professional standards, and when you're collecting data, you cannot be, there's an American term called cherry picking, but you cannot be selective in what you have to understand everything that could be relevant, good, bad, or otherwise.
Well, in my land, I would say what Jeff's talking about is this. When you're doing investigations, you collect the data without bias, and then you
Correct.
just gathering information, present the fact finding. You not try to catch anything or any error, just present the fact.
Correct, and that's those are the easiest cases, right? When you're just presenting the facts and not interpreting or opining, but we do that sometimes also. But yes, it's very binary, or it's very factual. Correct.
Yes. It can be gray area on that. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say black and white, but that's not true.
Yeah. As you guys see on the first 5, it's like good old times practice, and as far as 6 to 10 is almost like new era in technologies now. But in my belief, I still believe in good old day, in the same that earlier I talked to Kari about back in USA, practice is digitalized, and if paperless environments, you will practice in one way. But once you come to the paper environments, or the kind of organization structures different, data flow in the organization different, then you may practice and find the same litigations or same engagement, but it's totally different procedure on how you can collect investigation or collect data, because of the landscape is permit you just that. What I'm trying to say is this: if the company is very good old days, then you have to practice different from the other type of, that's the business. That's the appealing of forensic accounting. The good book is tell you what to do on this kind of technique. Says misappropriation, you have to start this and that. But when you go to the on the job process, the landscape of the organization is not permit, the data flow is not permit. Have you ever challenged on that?
Yes. Yeah. So, and sometimes it's, so, so when we're faced with a situation where we need to analyze certain data, obviously the quality and the format of that data becomes important to us. And there are a couple different things that factor into that. In some cases, it can just be a lack of sophistication in terms of how data is maintained. In other cases, and it could be more than one of these, but in other cases, it can be an age situation where we're going back and looking at things that are 20, 30, 40 years old, and maybe was sophisticated at some time, but certainly not anymore, and then we have to deal with that. Another one, which is kind of interesting that I've dealt with, is intentional lack of sophistication. Right? Is it intentional that we're not becoming more automated or more digital, because that allows for something that may have been going wrong and known to be going wrong to continue to go wrong undetected, because it is in such a sort of fragmented or poor format. So that's another challenge. The other one that we come across a lot too is, even with big companies that one would think are relatively sophisticated, if they've grown through patchworks of mergers and acquisitions, where they have not gone through the process of implementing a consistent sort of data software across the newly formed company, you can have a situation where, like I did one recently with a large medical healthcare company, where they just had medical records, but it was in 10 different warehouses, 10 different databases, I should say, and in 10 different formats. And we needed to extract all of them and then make them all the same for purposes of our database, right?
Yes.
You deal a lot with that with bank accounts too, right? I do work for the SEC, which is a government agency that monitors securities in the U.S. And if they're subpoenaing bank records, if they're getting bank records, every bank has its own format for a bank statement. So you have to take this information, and then if we want to look at it all in one place, we have to then convert that and get it all into one single database, so that we can see, okay, the money left this bank account and went to this bank account, and then it went to that bank account. And we create our own database that sanitizes all that information.
When you're talking about banking, yes, I faced that in my practice too. Different countries have different formats and regulations on the banking, and then the requirement on the statement are different too. And sometimes you have to go back to good old basic match to match, and sometimes find, like in digital literacy too, like when they see the file, they say, well, I sent you the file, but the file that you see, the way the behind the scene part, like at the surface look the same, but actually one is a picture and one is digital safe format. When you try to put in the software, trade forensic software, it won't take it because of the picture file versus the digitalized and stuff like that. And then the column is different. Data coding are another challenge part. But I try to tell everybody that you are not going to be an expert on every field. You are an accountant, but you have to know how to use expert in the different field. But at the same time, you have to know what they are doing before you go and asking for help,
You have to understand the capabilities, yes. So, and there's also understanding what software and technology is available, which is something that changes, all the time, right? So there's pretty sophisticated software now that we have that recognizes differences in bank statements, for example, between different banks, and you can create templates so that you can maybe not convert with 100% accuracy, but significantly cut down the amount of time necessary to get that information out of a paper form. But you still run into challenges. The statement might say check number 324 and this amount, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have to go to a picture of a check to see who it went to, or who cashed, or who signed, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's funny. People are worried about automation, and this is another good plug for forensic accounting right here. Let's get this one going. People are worried about automation, and there's a lot of discussion around how the accounting profession, over time, at least certain aspects of it, will have to adapt to automation, process automation, artificial intelligence, etc. I've been doing this for a while. Obviously, technology is very sophisticated. We still have cases where we have to, you know, manually put stuff in, and so does the government. We think the government's very sophisticated. They do too. All governments, including the U.S. So there's a human element to accounting, and there's always going to be a human element to forensic accounting. So that's one thing I like to say in terms of, you know, job security. The other thing is going back to the talking part, right? You know, that's probably the last thing that's going to get replaced by
computer
technology.
Still cannot catch up with us, but technology will be all the time, you know.
Yes, exactly. So I'm sure lawyers are excited to be able to cross-examine robots one day, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yes, and you know, like you just said about the technique on data gathering, there is you know, both social media structure and unstructured data and stuff like that. So can you share experience about that a little bit on that? How the challenge on investigations and this forensic accounting current now that multiple source of informations come through, how you dissect the information before you go start process on the forensic.
Yeah, and it's again, not, you know, there's no one size fits all when it comes to that information. In terms of the unstructured data, you know, we've had, you know, attempts at scraping unstructured data and coming up with ways to utilize it. You know, I think a lot of times that also can become more of a manual process where you're being a little bit more targeted in terms of, you know, what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely a challenge. I mean, depending on what type of case you're dealing with, like you have to make choices on what is an efficient process, right?
You have to focus.
Yes. You can't, you know, there's in a lot of cases, there's an unlimited amount of information, which is why we try to teach these tools, and we talk to these tools in our education and learning through the CFF, is that you have to sort of be strategic in terms of how you identify areas to investigate further. And a lot of times those conversations are had with your client or with some other stakeholder that you're working with, like an attorney, for example. Some understanding that, look, we can't go everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. But based on everything I know so far, I think we should focus on these three areas, and then it's going to take us this long to do it, and then let's reassess and say, you know, was this, you know, should we go somewhere else? Should we keep going down the rabbit hole of this area? Because these things also cost money, right? This is not some unlimited. There's a purpose to what we do. Either someone's trying to put somebody in jail, someone's trying to stay out of jail, someone's trying to sue someone, or someone's trying to not get sued, right? I mean, that's basically what we're dealing with here. And there's a cost to that. You know, if someone steals $10 from me, I'm not going to spend $1,000 to go figure out, to prove this person stole $10 from me. Now, some people will do that because they're emotional, but there's a cost associated with this. And that's why sometimes you have to be selective in terms of what data you gather and what data you analyze.
Do you have anything to share, Kari, on this what we're talking about?
I just want to support the examples that Jeff is giving, just from a supportive standpoint, an investigative standpoint of forensic accounting. That's a very real component, is using those reasonability tests and using those gut checks and being aware. Perhaps this is another area where human skills come in, of what is emotional and what is factual and what is material enough to act on. And even to the point of, I would imagine, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine that there are times where even if it were worth going after financially or legally, maybe the emotional toll would be too high, or the toll of stress level would be too high. And I've seen people walk away from cases like that, they just decided that life is too short and it wasn't worth their sanity to pursue it.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're, and there's emotional or psychological aspects to that. There's legal probability aspects to that in terms of how good of a case do we have. And then we get to weigh in too and say, with all of those things considered, what do we realistically think we're going to find, right? And oftentimes we're faced with that discussion at the front end and throughout an engagement, because we want to make sure we're not spending good money chasing bad, is what we say, and that there's an understanding and an expectation about what we may find or what we may not find. But that's definitely part of the equation. The other example I just thought of in terms of unstructured data, Payear, is that emails are like a perfect example of that, right?
Yes. Yes.
We'll work on cases where there'll be millions upon millions of emails, and we have software to digitize those and get them all into one place where they can be searched. But we have to be strategic, because we physically cannot read every single email and attachment.
Right.
It just cannot happen.
Yes.
And law firms have also are also very sophisticated in terms of being able to identify emails that are worth reading. But that's another area where we have to be realistic with ourselves. If someone says, I want to do an email review, we need to say, okay, well, let's come up with some process to determine how we're going to identify emails to review, because if you read every one, it's going to become very time intensive and very expensive.
Yes. The language is different. One day I talked to a friends, and they talk, how English word, each word is separate. It's not like continue like Thai, and the AI search finding mechanism on English part is much easier than Thai. Thai is like more challenge on the how you can do keyword. Like, because I used to, when I'm looking for my own email, I will use keyword, and data analysis on this, you have. Yeah, let me ask you this. How often do you use statisticians to do this kind of data, or you guys do it by yourself? How data, on the
just using
result.
Statistics or
Yes.
statistics. Yeah. So it gets used in a lot of different areas in forensic accounting. I do not have a graduate or degree in statistics, but there are a couple areas that where it does come into play. Obviously, just like in normal accounting, there are instances where we're sampling, right? So,
Yes.
just in a world where you're determining a statistically significant sample so that can be analyzed and then extrapolated to a larger population, we will leverage our statistical resources to identify or set forth what a statistically significant sample would be. So that's the first, and probably most common area where statistics comes into play.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But we also, there's people developing regression analyses to support damages theories.
Yes.
That happens. There's a whole field of statistics around securities litigation where people will do what's called an event study, where they'll use statistical analysis to say how one event impacted the price of a stock, considering all and controlling for all other potential things that may have impacted the stock price in a given day. And that's a very statistics heavy analysis. So we do see statisticians in our field. We also see PhD economists in our field, especially on the damages side and when you get into trade related disputes and antitrust and those sort of things. So certainly goes beyond accounting into finance and valuation and statistics and economics. But statistics is something where, we have someone in our firm who has, a graduate degree in that we rely on. Most accounting firms have some person who's capable for purposes of sampling. So it is common.
Yes, that's good. How about Kari? Do you have any interject on that topics? What do you think?
I do. Yes, I agree that the actuaries are quite often employed from the smaller firm point of view. So if you're doing benefit plans or you're doing some other type of insurance analysis for big data, that there is a great opportunity for forensic accountants to ally themselves with economists, as Jeff alluded to, or actuaries or other data analysts. And I think this also circles back to some of our specialty credentials that we introduced at the front as well, that if somebody is into data analytics and would like to do an ABV, for example, those are other specialty credentials offered by the AICPA that go hand in hand with forensic accounting.
The reason why I asked, I want to ask about the part that economic evaluations and merger acquisitions, how often the methodology that you guys use on the, how you investigate before you make decisions on data gatherings. Like, the focus on the economic evaluations part.
Economic damages.
Yes. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, no, sure. So, damages is a concept of financial harm. So a damage, and there are damages in U.S. law that are less tied to economics and more tied to what's statutory or rules, or there's something called punitive damages. But in terms of economic damages, at least from my perspective,
personal law,
that's the idea, and that as well too. Yes. So the idea is to develop a model that can quantify the financial harm associated with some event. So the most common example is a breach of a contract. So I have a contract with Kari, and Kari is supposed to supply me with some product, and I am then going to put that product into my product and sell it out into the market. Kari decides one day that she doesn't want to give me that product anymore, and she breaches her contract. And I sue her. I file a case against her for breaching that contract. I would then hire a forensic accountant, or I would hire a lawyer first, but then I would hire a forensic accountant to develop a model that would show the economic damage to me as a result of what Kari did. And there are all sorts of best practices and precedent in law for how one can develop those theories. But at the core, what we're trying to do in that scenario is say, if Kari didn't do what she did, what position would I have been in but for this event? So if I kept getting the product, I would have kept selling it, and I would have sold $10 million and I would have made $2 million in profit. But because I didn't have this product, I only sold $5 million in product and had $1 million in profit. So in that case, a very simple, example, I had damages in the form of lost profits of $1 million. And there's so much theory and analysis and data that goes into those, but that at its core is what we're doing when we're in a case where we're quantifying damages. And a couple other things to say about that. We talked about investigations and following the money. And, you said, Payear, it's factual, right? This is what happened. Once you figure it out and you have all the documents and the data, you can prove this is what happened. In a world of damages, it's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical world where if something didn't happen, this is what I think would have happened, right? If that makes sense. So when we think about it from a practitioner's perspective, that's a different type of opinion, because that's me saying, look, based on my professional opinion and all this analysis I've done, this is what I think would have happened. This is what I think the damages are, which is different than just saying, I've looked at all these bank statements and the money went from here to here, and I can show you through the documents.
Mm-hmm. This is the accountant practice, like accounting practice we use to collecting historical data. We used to wait until the evidence come and then we booking entry. We live in the past. The forensic accounting, what you said is we live for the future in some certain instance, but you use the historical data as a starting point to predict or forecast or hypothesize the assumptions with the constructive knowledge. And then at the end is be able to prove as evidence-based in a court of law.
Yes, within a reasonable degree of certainty. And using historical data is a big piece of that, but you're also going to consider macroeconomic factors associated with the economy or the industry, right? Perfect example now that we're living in, unfortunately, with this with COVID-19 is that had a negative impact on businesses, right? So in my scenario where Kari is providing me with a product, and then I'm selling a product that includes what Kari is giving me, after she breaches her contract, I'm showing that I'm losing money. My sales were going like this, and then it went like this, right? And what I'm trying to, if I'm the plaintiff in this case, if I'm the one complaining, I'm saying Kari's breach. I'm sorry, Kari, to keep blaming this on you. I should stop.
It's fine.
That the breach of contract is the reason why my sales have declined. Well, what if at the same time the contract was breached, this period right here on the graph is when COVID-19 came, and now no one's buying my product because I'm selling, I'm blanking on something, something that is not as important now, like dress shoes, for example, because I'm not wearing them right now. So that's a good, right? That's a good example. So it's not just using predictive data historical data to predict. It's also understanding all of the micro and macroeconomic factors associated with that business to support why you think sales would have been in this alternative universe, sales and profitability would have been, X.
I am curious on the COVID-19 and almost passed for US probably already like in the recovery stage mode now. Are there a lot of forensic accounting litigations and engagement
related to COVID-19?
Yes.
Yes. Well, they're in a number of different ways. You can see on the screen here, you see where it says bankruptcy, insolvency,
Yes.
and reorganization. Clearly, there are companies that were significantly harmed to the point of bankruptcy. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
We, at least in the United States, our government provided resources to our population to help them get through bad economic times. And we're now in a stage where there's a lot of fraud associated with people taking money from the government as relief that they may not have been entitled to.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing a lot of work in that space on the criminal side, in terms of people maybe that shouldn't have been doing that. So that's another area. Another one has to do with insurance, and that's actually something that is still being developed. But this idea that my business was impacted by this event, and I have insurance that protects me from getting impacted from an event, but how the event is defined and whether or not it qualifies, for insurance will dictate whether you can file a claim. But if you were to be able to file a claim, then you could go through that lost profits exercise we just talked about and say, how much money would I have made but for COVID? Which is an interesting question, right? Some businesses have done a lot better as a result, so it's kind of an interesting scenario. But definitely, we're seeing work strictly related to it. In terms of just the impact on the profession, initially, when it first started, all of the work that we had that was in court, because courts were not meeting, that was an impact to our business because all of those cases got delayed. But people are still fighting and stealing, and so that's we're another plug. Good thing for forensic accounting is it's what I think this is true. Maybe Kari is aware of some study on this since she's the academic, but I like to think that it's anti-recessionary. At least certain aspects of it are. Typically, frauds are uncovered when economies are in a downturn. The Madoff is the classic example of that, right? I mean, if the economy kept going, he may still be going. So that's another interesting thing. You talk about crises in the world and bad economies. Sometimes forensic accounting can go up when economies go down.
Yes, Kari, what do you think?
Do you agree, Kari?
I will have to agree with you, Jeff. And I thought of something when you were speaking about how things have been shifted through COVID and some of the constrained activities. And something that Payear said earlier about moving from a digital basis to a paper basis. And it has been interesting that we've actually at the association had to create stopgap measures to help regular auditors and forensic accountants to find alternate ways to do their basic work, such as gathering evidence. One example in particular was in a lockdown situation. How would you conduct an inventory review, or how would you go to vouch that something actually existed, or how would you conduct an interview or an interrogation? And so these were things that we actually had to create guidance for in the association. And I remember one case in particular was that we would have the employee at the location with their cell phone, their iPhone, visually vouch that they were there and walk us through their warehouse and I thought that's so unprecedented to be in that kind of a situation, and then to take that into a court of law, Jeff, and have to defend it or use it to prove something. I can only see that the indirect impact would be very complicated.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's definitely a different set of rules in terms of evidence when you can't physically be somewhere. And just even more generally speaking, the courts, have also moved to virtual. So, I've testified, under oath, on Zoom, many times over the past 2 years, where those would always be, in person. And it's an interesting dynamic because, there's arguably some pros and cons on both sides of the table when it comes to that, and everybody had to learn how to adjust very quickly to something that some attorneys have been doing live for 40 plus years before this happened. So definitely some impact, but I think everyone's been pretty adaptive.
In the view on CPA, CFF on the screen here, what the most litigations that you have been, seen for your career?
Yeah, so I mean, I think once you get on this wheel here, people really start to focus on certain things. So I would say in my career, I'm more in the orange, green, and purple world. We talked a little bit about damages. I'll spend a little bit of time on the fraud prevention and detection. That's pretty straightforward, but we refer to those typically as fraud investigations. Now, what's interesting about those is you can really get involved as a forensic accountant at a couple different stages. You can be the one that uncovers the fraud, and then you're sort of trying to figure out, and then you're sort of along, trying to figure out, what to do about it effectively. But you can actually uncover a fraud, right? In another scenario, there can be a suspicion of fraud, and we are hired to basically further investigate and either confirm or deny that suspicion of fraud. And then lastly, there's a confirmed fraud, and we are retained to investigate the exposure and understand how big this fraud could be, and then also maybe how it happened and how to prevent it going forward through additional internal controls and processes and procedures. So with fraud, I look at that as for those in the accounting profession. Obviously, if you're doing audit and tax, you can uncover fraud. If you're in internal audit, clearly you're trying to prevent fraud, but you can uncover fraud. And then forensic accounting, and we're usually getting involved at some stage along that process there. So our firm and myself included do a fair amount of fraud. And financial statement misrepresentation, when done intentionally, is fraud, right? That is a type of fraud. And that's another area that we do a fair amount of work with. I spent, a month in the summer at a trial as a consultant on this very issue. It was a securities fraud, but the individuals were being accused of intentionally misrepresenting the financial information to their auditors and to the investing public. And something to also note about fraud, because in the United States, we have developed some standards associated with forensic accounting. And one thing that came out of our new forensic accounting standard is this idea that fraud is a legal concept, and as forensic accountants, we should not be offering a legal opinion effectively that something was a fraud. We can establish that something has all of the indicia or elements of a fraud, but to say it is a fraud is really a legal conclusion, right? Because fraud, and I'm not a lawyer, so this is not me now teaching law, but fraud has to do with intent, among other things. Right. And it's not, at least not my role in what I do, to establish that somebody did something intentionally. There may be evidence that touches on forensic accounting related areas that would support that person did it intentionally. But that is not our role, and I think that's an important point to note. To note for the audience. Yes,
that's what I'm trying to go back to what I said. Just present the fact finding. So because to say is the fraud actually occur or not is up to the court opinions, in my opinions. So I try to tell everybody that forensic accounting is not like train you to catch bad guy. It's just the job to investigate litigations or whatever that you assign for, which is different from internal audit or internal control perspective in the term of more specialized focus on engagement. You have to catch this, there is a hypothesis before you decided to engage to whatever the assigned to you on the case. My question is, the next question that I'm thinking is, in your opinions, how many times, like say percentage on end up in the settlement, the case is once you will finish gathering data, present the fact, how many, I heard you said about you testify on the court. So basically, can I say is majority of your engagement end up in the court or not?
Yeah. So it's not a majority, but it's it varies year to year. And in terms of cases going to court and not going to court, there is a whole host of reasons, related and unrelated, to the forensic accountant for why that may occur. And in some years, I'll have more cases go to court because maybe I get involved at a stage where it's clear that it's going to go to court, as compared to getting involved earlier. And then there's a lot of things that can happen along the way where the case may go away. It may settle, and it also may get dismissed. A court could decide that there's not a worthy claim, and say, that everybody go home. So I would say more than half of our cases don't end up going to a trial. There are, I'm sure, some very good statistics out there that lawyers will tell you on how many cases settle. I've heard lawyers say it. I have not independently verified it, but I think it's more than 80%. It could be more than 90% of cases don't go to trial. but I don't, don't quote me on
Yes.
that. But it, most of our work is not in the courtroom. It's leading up to it. Yeah, and it's not our job to make it settle, but sometimes, we are involved in that. We get involved in mediations and settlement negotiations, and so it's definitely part of the business.
Yes. How your engagement, like the shortest engagement, say how short you ever done in your career, like finish job within a year? The shortest.
Oh yeah, even shorter. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing with our firm right now, actually, is we're trying to not take cases that are too, sometimes people don't think they need us, and hesitate to get us involved early. And then they realize later on that they do need us, and there's not a lot of time left to get done the work we need to get done. So, we'll have engagements that are 1 month, 2 month, 3 month. But we also have engagements that go on for, years and years and years. I have a case right now that I just testified in where I wasn't involved when it started, but the case was originally filed in 2005, and has just continued, for more than 15 years. And I've been involved for the last 3. And, I thought it was over, and now someone's going to appeal something, and it's going to keep going on for who knows how long.
Yes.
So it can vary, but we do work on cases that can. It is a deadline driven world that we live in too. I mean, I know in accounting you have filing deadlines, and in tax you have filing deadlines. We usually have court deadlines or internal, client driven deadlines. So there's no traditional busy season. It kind of depends on what we're doing. But it's definitely a deadline driven sort of project based world that we live in. There's a start and there's usually an end.
Yes. There is a questions on here. The Kadumjang asking questions about inventory evaluations. Have you ever done that? In Thailand, we have a lot of inventory evaluations that causing a problem. For example, fraud came and the inventory is destroyed, and then we have to have some certain requirement on the IRS regulations that when you destroy the inventory, you have to do certain procedure to go through, as well as like US GAAP have, you have to have certain procedures, but at the same time, there is stipulations on the inventory evaluation price, that you cut loss on your financial statement.
And you said evidence.
How the process, like you ever done that? The evidence that you will start on the type of this type of engagement on the evaluation process on inventory evaluations. Have you?
I have not. Maybe I don't understand the question.
Yes.
But no,
what happened is this. For example, the insurance case, the companies have inventory damage, and they claim insurance that there is a fraud, and they claim insurance the evaluation on the price of the damage, certain price, say, and the insurance company may not believe it. Insurance company contact you and say, well, I need you to go in, evaluate what they claim is true or not before I give them, money on that.
Yes. Sorry. So I've done, and we do in forensic accounting. We can work on behalf of the company filing the claim to help support a loss that is recoverable under insurance. And then there's also a whole field of forensic accountants that almost work exclusively for insurance companies that are investigating or at least documenting and questioning potential claims for any number of insurance related coverages, which there are no shortage.
Well, I just noticed we are close to the time now. I'm really appreciate you guys for the time, and it's late. You guys probably sleepy by now, but I'm enjoy listening to Jeff talk, and it's very good knowledge and information. And well, I would like you guys to have the last talk on Jeff. You have anything to suggest us and cheer us up on forensic accounting practice?
Yeah, I would just say that I appreciate everyone showing interest in the profession. I know that there are different rules and regulations in different parts of the world, but corruption and fraud are universal, and that there needs to be smart accountants that have a desire to investigate and to find answers. And that I would encourage people that find that interesting to pursue opportunities in forensic accounting.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Next, Kari.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it is a privilege to join in today and have a globally oriented conversation about the need for more forensic accountants in the profession. And if there is any interest among the audience, please do contact Payear or myself. We, again, are doing a large global campaign with the AICPA, and we are interested in building our connections worldwide. And so we would love to come back again at a future date and talk more with you. And thank you again for having us.
Yes, we welcome. Thank you very much. I appreciate your times, and it's very late at night, midnight over there now, midnight, 30 minutes past midnight. And thank you very much for everyone to join us, and hopefully we will have the next sessions on some requests on cybercrime and blockchain forensic accounting and digital forensic accounting type topics. And it's good to share experience between different part of the world, even though there is different culture or laws and regulations. So however, there is a business law, rules, and accounting language that we join, So appreciate it, and hopefully we see each other again for the next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.